caffeine.
Caffeine. It's got caffeine. Oh,
You don't
okay.
like that?
He doesn't want, he can't have it. How about you? The cups there? No.
The cups are over yonder.
Oh, here's someplace. Well, let's see, we're going to look at Exodus 3 and 4. Let me get a sip of water here before I start reading. Let's make you guys read.
Take more than 19 minutes.
What's going to take here? That's why the questions won't be too tough. So starting with Exodus 3. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. The Lord saw that he had gone over to look. God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. Moses said, Here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, and Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now, go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? God said, I will be with you, and this will be a sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Moses said to God, Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, The God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, What's his name? Then what shall I tell them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, Say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, the name by which I am to be remembered from generation to generation. Go assemble the elders of Israel and say to them, The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, appeared to me and said, I have watched over you and have seen what has been done to you in Egypt. I have promised to bring you up out of your misery in Egypt into the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. The elders of Israel will listen to you. Then you and the elders are to go to the king of Egypt and say to him, The Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Let us take a 3-day journey into the desert to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless a mighty hand compels him. So I will stretch out my hand and strike the Egyptians with all the wonders that I will perform among them. After that he will let you go. And I will make the Egyptians favorably disposed toward this people, so that when you leave you will not go empty-handed. Every woman is to ask her neighbor, and any woman living in her house, for articles of silver and gold and for clothing, which you will put on your sons and daughters, and so you will plunder the Egyptians. Moses answered, What if they don't believe me or listen to me or say, The Lord did not appear to you? And the Lord said to him, What is that in your hand? A staff, he replied. The Lord said, Throw it on the ground. Moses threw it on the ground, it became a snake, and he ran from it. Then the Lord said to him, Reach out your hand and take it by the tail. So Moses reached out and took hold of the snake, and it turned back into a staff in his hand. This, said the Lord, is so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. Then the Lord said, Put your hand inside your cloak. So Moses put his hand into his cloak, and when he took it out, it was leprous, like snow. Now, put it back into your cloak, he said. So Moses put his hand back into his cloak, and when he took it out, it was restored, like the rest of his flesh. Then the Lord said, if they do not believe you or pay attention to the first miraculous sign, they may believe the second. But if they do not believe these two signs or listen to you, take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground. The water you take from the river will become blood on the ground. Moses said to the Lord, O Lord, I have never been eloquent, nor in the past, nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow to speech and tongue. The Lord said to him, who gave man his sight? Who makes him deaf or mute? Who gives him sight or makes him blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go. I will help you speak and will teach you what to say. But Moses said, O Lord, please send someone else to do it. And the Lord's anger burned against Moses, and he said, what about your brother Aaron, the Levite? I know he can speak well. He is already on his way to meet you, and his heart will be glad when he sees you. You shall speak to him and put words in his mouth. I will help both of you speak and will teach you what to do. He will speak to the people for you, and it will be as if he were your mouth and as if you were God to him. But take this staff in your hands so you can perform miraculous signs with it. And Moses went back to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said, let me go back to my own people in Egypt. All right. Need to wet my whistle here quick. I'm reading. First question here. Who is the angel of the Lord in this account?
Jesus.
Who is it?
Jesus.
Second person of the Trinity, isn't it? It's the Lord himself here. You think of any other time in the Old Testament where the angel of the Lord appeared?
Abraham.
He came to Abraham
Think of Abraham.
and put them in the fiery furnace.
Think of the fiery furnace.
Wrestled with Jacob.
Was that?
Wrestled with Jacob.
Wrestled with Jacob. You think of Abraham, you think of Hagar then, where God appeared to her and said, go back, because remember she was trying to run away. Appeared a lot of times in the Old Testament. Well, how about two? Why was Moses afraid to look at God?
Moses was a sinner.
He's sinful.
He knew he was a sinner. And interesting, because later on, he's going to ask God, can I see your face? Remember what God told him? You can't see my face and live. And so God said, fine, I'll let you see my back end. And that way you won't die. So his glory passed in front of him. Well, number three, I am who I am. What statement or statement does this unique and simple name make about God? Kind of an it's actually a verb in the Hebrew. I am. Some pronounce it Yahweh, Jehovah. What's behind that name?
There's no one else.
Eternity.
Yeah.
Well, you said I am before, haven't you? I mean, I can say I am the pastor of St. John's. Have I always been the pastor here?
No.
Will I always be the pastor here?
Maybe not.
That's all what you said, Bob. You know it's wrong. No, I'm not. Won't be. What about God? He says, I am.
He was and always will be.
Always.
Always has been,
Always
always
will
will be. What was it, one of our hymns today? I think it was the fourth verse, talked about Jesus Christ the same yesterday, today, and forever. He never changes. There's a lot of comfort in that, isn't it? No, God is never going to change. I mean, as parents raising children, we set down the law, didn't we? What they could do, what they couldn't do. Were we always consistent on it? Did you treat child number 1 the same way you did number 4? Or did number 4 get away with a few things that number 1 didn't? Or at least that's what number 1 complains about, right? We change, don't we? You know, you look at your own self. Have you changed over the years? I have. I've mellowed out a little bit in my old age. People change. God does not change. He is constant. And think of the comfort we have in it. He is constant. What he said years ago still applies today. I mean, sure, he said 3,000 years ago, I've cast your sins as far as the east is from the west. It's still true today. Time doesn't play into it. Well, second part here. What was Jesus claiming in John 8:58 when he said, before Abraham was, I am? I should
Is
tell you,
God?
grammatically, it's bad English. What should he have said grammatically?
I was.
Before Abraham was, I was. But he didn't say that. He said, before Abraham was, I am. What's he claiming?
He's God.
Eternity.
He's the great I am, isn't he? He's the Lord himself. And of course, you know what happened after he said that? See, prior to this, Jesus had talked about how Abraham rejoiced to see his day. He said, wait a minute, you aren't even 40 years old yet. How could you see Abraham? And he said, before Abraham was, I am. Did they bow down and start worshiping him?
Tried to stone him.
They hated
They
it.
wanted to stone him. And why would they want to stone him?
He was blasphemy.
Sure, they knew what he was saying. They knew he just didn't mess up grammatically. They knew he was saying, I am the great I am. And they wanted to stone him for blasphemy. But he is the great I am, isn't he? When you think about it, it's like we said before, in Hebrews it says Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so all those things we talk about the Lord, it's Jesus. The NIV is actually kind of nice about when they get to God's proper name, the Lord, they put it all in capital letters. When you get God's proper name. So it's a little hint as you're reading through the Old Testament. When you come across the Lord in all capital letters, that's the great I am. That's the God of free and faithful grace, the God who is constant. And even in sections, I was just reading through Ezekiel last night, and Ezekiel is not, how could you put it? Well, God told Ezekiel, go and tell these people you're going into captivity. They were being punished. Not a whole lot of gospel in there, is there? But who was sending him?
God.
The Lord, capital letters, God of free and faithful grace. Okay, last question here. This one might take a little bit. Outline Moses' objections to the Lord's commissioning. He had 5. What were his objections? If you look at them. Oh, where are they? Look at verse 11. I mean, he comes up with all these excuses, doesn't he?
They won't listen.
Verse 11, he says, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? Jump down. Where is it? Verse 13. Another excuse. Suppose they say, what's your name? What am I going to tell them? He's coming up with all these different excuses. And then in chapter 4, he says, what if they don't believe me or listen to me? Jump down to verse 10. Where is that? He says, I've never been eloquent. And then finally, where is that? Verse 13. He says, Lord, just send somebody else. I can see why God got teed off at the end, huh? Were any of his objections valid? I mean, you look at some of these where he says, who am I that he should go before Pharaoh? Was that a valid argument?
No, because he had been in Pharaoh's court.
spent
so
40 years
he did know what
in the
it was like.
palace. Why shouldn't he go? He knew how everything worked. He knew how to get into Pharaoh, the proper protocol and all this other stuff. So that one wasn't valid. What about when they say, I mean, he's kind of grasping for straws a little bit here. What if they ask for your name? What am I supposed to tell them? I don't know it. God said, well, here it is. God answered him then. And look where he said, what if they don't believe me or listen to me? Is that valid? Would they? It's interesting, when God is talking here, does he know what's going to happen?
Yes.
He said the elders will.
He said they aren't going to listen. I'll tell you that right now. And you're going to do these couple of miracles? They aren't going to believe them. So I'm going to send some really tough miracles. And we're going to look at those in the next week. But if you look at the 10 plagues that God sent, the first couple, the magicians could mimic. But then it got to the point where, sorry guys, we can't do it. And what did the magicians realize?
Well, they could do it, but they couldn't take it away.
Okay, but it gets to a point where they couldn't even do them. And you look at some of those. What are the 10 plagues? Remember?
Water turned to blood.
Water turned.
Water turned to blood.
Yeah, frogs.
Frog, I always loved frogs. Frogs were one of the gods of the Egyptians. And the Bible tells us there were so many on the ground they couldn't help but step on it. Would you want to walk outside? Oh, there's my God. So I think God was throwing a little humor. Actually, all of the plagues reflected on their gods. Gods of darkness, sunshine, storms. You look at all of the... What's interesting is a lot of those, when it got dark, where did it get dark?
In Egypt, or where they lived, where the Egyptians lived.
Except where the Israelites were. These plagues hit all around them, but not there. And we're going to talk more about the 10th plague next week. But God knew these things were going to happen, but he still gave them ammunition, so to speak. Of course, then get to verse 10 where it says, I'm not eloquent. I can't speak. Is that true?
No, because he had been brought up.
He had been brought up in Pharaoh's palace. No doubt he could speak. And actually, when you listen to him in the years ahead, he is quite eloquent. He's very gifted with speech. But, of course, don't we do that too?
We all use
Oh,
that.
we use excuses.
If I turn and I say, Vern, I want you to give a presentation after church. I don't know how many times I've heard people say, I can't speak in public. Unless you've tried it, right? How many of you have spoken in public? How many of you could stand up in front of 100 people and talk? Have you ever tried it? It's not as bad as you think it is. If you're prepared, you got nothing to sweat. I mean, if you go up totally unprepared, well, yeah, maybe you should shake in your boots a little bit. But, anyways. Then he gets to the final one, and he finally says, God, why don't you just send somebody else? And, of course, God wasn't too thrilled about that, was he? And who did he say was going to help him?
Aaron.
Brother Aaron. What?
Moses was during that time when the children were all killed off. When did Aaron come?
He was older than Moses. The way I look at it is he was born, and he was probably X number of years. I don't remember how much older he was than Moses, but then the edict came to kill all the little boys, the newborns. So he was spared. But how much he knew of his brother, I don't know.
Well, he must have known some because Moses was there with the family.
He was there for 4 or 5 years,
Right.
and then he got shipped off to Pharaoh's house. And I'm sure you're going to know your little brother. And you probably keep an eye on him too. See how your little brother's doing. I mean, you look at your little brothers, right? Right, Louis?
They don't always listen, though.
Good point.
They never listen.
Well, how about second part here? Do Christians today offer similar objections? God tells us to go. What do we say?
Not me,
We have-
not me.
Not me.
Not me.
Send somebody
Send
else.
somebody else, right? I can't talk. Interesting, when I was in Wisconsin, we had some, I don't even remember what it was. Well, it happened a couple times. We had a stewardship thing where actually one of the elders got up and talked. He had never done that before. But after he did, he said, no, it wasn't that bad. And then I remember one Christmas service we had the parents involved. I went to the parents and I said, you guys want to read some of this stuff? What do you think answers I got?
No, let somebody
Sound
else.
just like Moses, right? I'm not eloquent. All you gotta do is read. I mean, I'll let you bury your nose in the paper. Or send somebody else. We have all these objections. Well, you look back to all the objections that Moses had, how did God answer them?
I'm with you.
He said, suppose they don't listen to me. God said they will. Suppose, what's your name? God gave him the answer. Send somebody else. Of course, go back one. I'm not eloquent. What did God say?
Send
I'll
Aaron.
tell you what to say. And he did, didn't he? I mean, you think of, put yourself in Moses' spot for a minute. You're 40 years old. No, at this point you're 80.
Yeah.
The first 40 years of your life, you lived in Pharaoh's house. You learned all the rules, regulations, everything else. They were your family. Now, you're away for 40 years. 40 years later, you come back. And you got to talk to these people that you loved. Not easy, is it?
Those
Not
were-
easy, but
Those were his superiors at that time.
sure.
And now all of a sudden he's supposed to be telling them what to do.
Yeah, and do they really want to listen? I mean, going to someone that you love and telling them these things, is that easy? I think back, in Wisconsin, we had a church discipline case where the person was, everybody in town loved the guy. He was well-known, everybody, I'm not kidding, everybody in town knew this guy. Everybody loved him. Well, he was in some trouble, and I went through, started with my elders, and I said, come and visit him with me. No, too good of a friend, he's my neighbor. I went through my whole church council. Nobody would go. Finally, had an elderly guy in the church, and always liked the guy, relied on him, trusted him. I said, Alden, would you go? And he started off just like the other guys. You know, I grew up with him. He's my best friend. He's my next door neighbor. I have to go. And he did. I couldn't count on my counsel, but I counted on this guy. And he did it purely out of love. Because he loved that guy. He didn't want to see him go to hell. And so he went and he said, brother, you're sinning. You don't repent, you're going to hell. And kind of like Moses, he got brushed off. But he went back again. He kept going back, and the guy never did listen. But it's one of those where, out of love, you have to do it. Was it easy? No. I mean, knocking on somebody's door asking about Jesus, is it easy? No, I think I told you about the time I went canvassing in Florida. Walking up the first sidewalk, and I said, God, don't let anybody be here. Nobody was home. So as I'm walking down the sidewalk, I said, good for you, Lord, let's make it 2 for 2. He said no. And after a couple of houses, I thought, what am I worried about? I don't care what these people think. I'm there to share Jesus, that's it. Did some people slam the door in my face? Sure. Not everybody did. There were some that said, hey, I want to hear more about him. But it's getting over that initial fear. Once you've done it, it's not so bad. God's going to tell you what to say anyways. There were times where I witnessed to people where I got home and I go, where did I come up with that? And I don't remember learning that. God says, I'll tell you what to say. I'll put the words in your mouth. And He does. All right. If you got any questions? Did I make 19 minutes then? It's close, huh? You come to Trinity, we never make 19 minutes. That usually goes an hour and 15 minutes. I blame Pastor Paul. Oh, I shouldn't say that, it's being recorded.
It was a lot.
Was it?
It was a lot to read.
There was a lot to read, yeah. I'll make him read on Tuesday. Well, if there are no questions, we'll close with the prayer that we have here. When I am called to serve, Lord, let me remember that you are, I am, ever faithful and unchanging in your love for me. Move me by your grace to serve you willingly, to the glory of your saving name. Amen. Well, next week we'll talk about the Passover. And we'll touch on the pledge. I trust you're all dug out of the snow by now.
Well.